the pro-life movement was never about Jane Roe or Norma McCorvey or any one person. The pro-life movement is about the belief or the knowledge that abortion ends an innocent human life.
There's a new FX documentary coming out called AKA Jane Roe, which focuses on Norma McCorvey, who's also known as Jane Roe in Roe v. Wade, the 1973 Supreme Court case that legalized abortion nationwide. Here to talk about this is Alexandra DeSanctis, who recently wrote a column on this for National Review called "The Pro-Life Cause Doesn't Rest on Jane Roe's Shoulders." Alexandra, I'd like to ask you why this documentary, if you could explain briefly in detail, why this documentary is catching so much attention, attracting so much attention in media outlets, media stories, and on social media.
I think it was kind of a bombshell kind of report or documentary because in the lead up to releasing this new documentary, the filmmakers, I guess, let it leak that Jane Roe said in an interview shortly before her death that her conversion to the pro-life cause was all fake. And this was, obviously a pretty big deal because she had been the kind of name behind Roe v. Wade, which legalized abortion, and was very, very pro-abortion for several decades after that case, and later ended up converting to evangelical Christianity, converting to Catholicism, becoming very staunchly pro-life and becoming a pro-life activist and kind of campaigning on behalf of the pro-life movement all over the country and giving speeches. And so the pro-life movement had kind of embraced her as a big name convert for a good reason, I think. And so in this documentary, she essentially says, look, I was paid to do this, and the interview gives the sense that it wasn't authentic. Her change of heart wasn't real, and so that was kind of a big deal, I think, to pro-lifers if that were true. But also, I think it was a pretty big deal to people who support legal abortion and saw this person who had been embraced by the pro-life cause, apparently just before death, saying that had not been the case.
And you see media reports out there right now, kind of using this to discredit the pro-life movement as a whole. And you mentioned a media spin in your column for National Review. Could you go into that a little bit about what Americans should be keeping in mind when they're seeing the media reporting on this story?
Sure, yeah. And in pretty much every report that I saw, it was almost this kind of gleeful tone of, look how fake the pro-life movement is. Look at how, Jane Roe was basically lying the whole time. And, the gist of what you're reading is no one could actually be pro-life. It's all just this big sham. And I think it was kind of sad to see because, kind of like I mentioned, for good reason, Jane Roe or Norma McCorvey had been a figurehead in some ways because she was the woman who made abortion legal. Her case was the reason why we have abortion on demand in all 50 states. And so to see that woman express so much regret decades later and seemingly come to faith and come to the pro-life movement made a big difference to pro-life people. And so I think the other side in media, unfortunately, a lot of reporters are very sympathetic to the pro-abortion cause. I think it was kind of a championing moment or a celebration moment for them to see maybe that actually hadn't been the case. And it kind of was a blow to the pro-life narrative of conversion stories. And so unfortunately, that's what a lot of the stories seem to be pushing.
Do you think this makes a difference in the pro-life movement? Because, the title of your column is "The Pro-Life Cause Doesn't Rest on Jane Roe's Shoulders." So should Americans be really upset about this? Should the pro-life movement be really ashamed about this? Or should they say we're about more?
Yeah, that kind of was my takeaway when I watched sort of the clips or read about it. I think what we really have to take away from it is the pro-life movement was never about Jane Roe or Norma McCorvey or any one person. The pro-life movement is about the belief or the knowledge that abortion ends an innocent human life, and we oppose that. And that's the case whether or not Norma McCorvey actually had a change of heart. I think that's what we have to keep in mind. And it was so interesting to see so many of these abortion rights activists have spent decades saying it doesn't matter that Norma McCorvey became pro-life. No one cares. It doesn't change the argument. Legal abortion is still, it should be the law of the land. And we don't need to talk about the fact that she's a pro-life speaker or a leader. Don't talk to us about that. It doesn't matter. And they were actually right about that. I mean, her story was interesting for good reason. We paid attention to it, but I don't think anyone out there was pro-life because the woman behind Roe v. Wade later became pro-life. The point is we have an argument against abortion because of what it is. And so I think pro-lifers should, I guess, if they're religious, keep her in their prayers. And clearly she had a very sad and difficult life, and we probably will never know the truth of what was going on in her heart or what happened with any of her conversions back and forth. But the heart of the pro-life movement is about the dignity and the value of every human life.
What should American viewers remember when they're watching this? Do you have any tips or advice on that for
Yeah,
America?
I mean, I think that kind of the most important thing to keep in mind is, first of all, we obviously will never really know the truth of what was going on in her heart. And so to see this documentary as kind of the final word on what she really believed or thought is not the right way of looking at it. It's kind of another piece of the puzzle, perhaps. But I don't think there's certainly reasons to doubt some of the things that are portrayed in the documentary from what I've read. So I wouldn't take it as gospel truth or anything like that. But I also think it's really important for viewers to be educated about what happened in Roe v. Wade and what happened to Norma McCorvey throughout her life. She really was misused by the people who wanted to push legal abortion in that case. And I don't think, the fact that perhaps she later was used by people on the other side doesn't change the fact that she was manipulated and that Roe v. Wade was entirely anti-unconstitutional, just made up out of nowhere for political reasons. And it's a terrible case. And I think viewers should kind of acquaint themselves with the facts about that as well.